The first ancestor of the Xiongnu, named Chun was a descendant of the great Yu, the founder of the Xia dynasty. Previous to the time of Yao and Shan, we hear of a race called the Mountain Zhang. These were the Hinyan or Xiongnu who inhabited the northern regions and moved from place to place according to the pasturage for their flocks and herds. The bulk of their stock consisted of horses, oxen, and sheep, but in the smaller numbers they bred likewise camels, asses, mules, horse-ass hybrids, wild horses, and hybrids of the same. Moving their herds to find water and pasturage, they had no fixed cities, but dwelt on their rural patrimonies, each family having its allotted portion of land. They had no written character, but performed oral contracts. The children rode on sheep, and shot birds and squirrels with the bow and arrow. When a little bigger, they shot foxes and hares, the flesh of which they ate. On reaching manhood, when able to bend a bow, they were fully equipped and mounted on horseback. In time of peace, they hunted for their living, but when harassed by war, they cultivated martial exercises to fit them for invasion or attack, which was agreeable to their disposition. The taller troops were armed with bows and arrows, the shorter with swords and spears. When successful in the contest, they pressed forward, but on meeting with a reverse, they retreated and thought it no shame to run away. On gaining a victory, they showed no regard to propriety or equity. From the king downwards, all ate the flesh of domestic animals and clothed themselves with the skins, wearing a fur covering over all. The able-bodied ate the fat and choice portions, while the aged ate and drank what was left. The strong and robust were held in esteem, while the old and feeble were treated with contempt. When a father died, they married their widowed mother, and when a brother died, it was customary to marry his widow. Their names were not transmitted to their descendants. According to their laws, he who drew a sword a foot in length against another was put to death. Anyone guilty of highway robbery was deprived of his family possessions. Small crimes were punished with the rack, and greater crimes with death. The longest imprisonment did not amount to 10 days, and all the prisoners in the country only numbered a few individuals. Early in the morning, the Xiongnu, the leader of the Xiongnu, went outside the camp to worship the rising sun, and in the evening he worshipped the moon. In funerals, they used coffins and cases containing gold, silver, and clothing, but they had no grave mound, trees, or mourning apparel. Several tens or even hundreds of near dependents and concubines were accustomed to follow their master's funeral. In undertaking any military enterprise, they were always guided by the moon. When the moon was about full, they would engage in battle, but when on the wane, they withdrew from the contest. When one beheaded a captive in battle, he received a goblet of wine and was allowed to retain the booty. Captives were given as slaves to their captors, so that in war every man was struggling for personal profit. They were clever at leading the enemy into an ambush and then surrounding them. The eagerness of the scramble was like birds flocking to the prey, but when calamity overtook them, they were dispersed like scattered tiles or passing clouds. Anyone bringing home the body of a man slain in battle got the property of the deceased. At a subsequent period, in the north, they subjected the Huanyu, the Qiushi, the Tingling, the Qihuanlong, and the Sin Li nations. The nobles and chief men of the Xiongnu then all submitted to Mao Tun, whom they looked up to as a wise prince. The Han dynasty having just come into power, Sin, the Prince of Han, was moved to Tei and made his capital at Ma Ye. This city was forthwith surrounded by the Xiongnu, who took the place after a vigorous assault in the autumn of 201 BC. Having secured the submission and cooperation of Sin of Han, the Xiongnu marched south across the Cao Stream to attack Tai Yuan, and when under the walls of the capital, Cao Tei, the emperor of the Han, took up arms and went in person to oppose them. It being winter time, what with the severe frost, the rain and the snow, 20 to 30% of the emperor's troops lost the use of their fingers. Mao Tun, watching his opportunity, made an appearance of being defeated and fled, drawing all the Han troops after him. While the latter eagerly followed up the pursuit, Mao Tun concealed his best soldiers and exposed the weak and emaciated. The Chinese, confident in their great numbers, held 320,000 infantry for the pursuit. Cao Tei, with a detachment of these, arriving at Pingqing before the great body had come up, Mao Tun immediately brought into the field 300,000 of his choicest cavalry and surrounded the emperor's party at Pitang Hill. For 7 days, all communication was cut off between the Chinese forces inside and those outside the circle, the enclosed party being thus deprived of provisions. The Xiongnu horses on the west side were all white. On the east, they were all white-faced greys. On the north, they were all black, and on the south, they were all bays. Reduced to extremities, Cao Tei quietly sent a messenger to the consort of the Xiongnu to seek by liberal promises to secure her influence, in which he was successful. The consort, addressing Mao Tun, said, "Why should two sovereigns distress each other? Having now got possession of the Han territory, the Xiongnu can never occupy it. Moreover, the Xiongnu sacrifices to the spirits of the lords of Han." Now Mao Tun, having previously made an agreement with Wang Huang and Chao Li, two generals of Sin, the Prince of Han, and having been long looking in vain for their arrival, at length began to suspect some plot between them and the Chinese. Hence he acceded the more willing to his consort's suggestion, and made an opening at one corner of the cordon. Cao Tei then ordered his troops to take their full complement of arrows pointing outwards, and so, passing straight out at the open corner, they joined the great body of the army. Mao Tun then withdrew his forces, and the Chinese troops ceased all hostile movements, while Liu Qing was sent to make a treaty of peace and friendship with the Xiongnu. Subsequently, Sin of Han, being a general under the Xiongnu, together with Chao Li and Wang Huang, several times broke the treaty. About that time, parties of the Xiongnu frequently, on meeting the Chinese general at the head of his troops, would tender their submission, on which account Mao Tun kept up a succession of raids on the country about Tei. This was a cause of much anxiety to the Chinese, and eventually led the emperor to adopt the notable expedient of sending a princess of the imperial house to Mao Tun for his consort. The Lady Eng Chu was selected and conveyed to the home of her new lord by Liu Qing. It was hoped that the issue of this union might be more imbued with Chinese susceptibilities and tendencies, and thus be more easily brought under control. In pursuance of the same policy, the Chinese sent yearly presents of raw and woven silk, wine and food, thus aiming to cultivate Chinese tastes among them, and on each occasion the fraternal bond of peace and amity was renewed, so that for a time there was a cessation of Mao Tun's incursions.